Welcome back. Kevin's Corner on a Wednesday afternoon, September 21st. I am Kevin Bowen. Eddie Garrison is across the way. It is a steamy one here in Indianapolis. Football weather seems to be on the horizon, but today felt like training camp, frankly, out at West 56th Street. Honestly, I don't remember a day at Grand Park being as hot as today was.
I think that first day was pretty hot. That first day we went to, it was that first outdoor practice.
Because the first practice they were indoors.
Yeah.
And then that first one was a little sticky, but that's one where you just walk. Today's one of those days where I like because I walk to the car and I've worked out for the day.
Yeah.
It just feels good. I'm like, I'm already sweating. This is great. Don't have to work out. That's what today is here in Indianapolis. The home opener, Jim Nance, Tony Romo on the call here on Sunday afternoon from Lucas Oil Stadium. It'll be interesting for many, many reasons, this game. I think what and how the crowd looks like and reacts, I think will be something as well. We'll like we do every Wednesday podcast here in the regular season, we'll give our prediction. In today's podcast, I guess is kind of a potpourri is the word that's coming to mind. It was always kind of a great Jeopardy category. I haven't watched Jeopardy in a while, though. I should dial that back up. But a little bit of everything. When I was out last week, I felt like, man, there's a lot of kicker stuff that I should bring up on the podcast when I do get back in studio. And then I guess a little bit of T.Y. Hilton stuff that I want to mention as well. And then we do have some Twitter questions. A lot of them in the last 48 hours that have been sent to myself and Eddie, but some from week one that I thought was relevant. So I don't want to act like this is just me rehashing week one, but there will be a little bit of everything on today's podcast. Eddie, you got anything before we hop in?
Before we hop into like the stuff we want to talk about today, at practice, any notables? Pittman, Pierce out there?
Yeah, Michael Pittman out there, Alec Pierce out there. Alec Pierce in a blue jersey, so that's good. It sounds like the final step of concussion protocol is his clearance. Now, I think with both of those guys, probably Pittman more than Pierce, the Thursday practice report will be the big one. Because last week, if I'm not mistaken, both of them practiced Wednesday. And then, some stuff developed Thursday. I think for Pierce it was a little bit later in the week in that he wasn't able to clear that concussion protocol. But good early news on that front. Bernard Ryman was not practicing. He was walking very gingerly out to practice. So I would say his availability for Sunday is up in the air. Therefore, Matt Pryor, you are retaining your left tackle job, if that is even a debate internally. We can get into that in Twitter questions. And then lastly, Shaquille Leonard. He continues to practice. I know everyone wants to know, is he going to play? Like, if you're asking me at 3:11 on Wednesday afternoon, I think he might miss another one. I'm starting to think back to the Chris Bauer press conference, Eddie, when Chris says, when Shaq gets out to practice, now that he's off the PUP list, it's like the first day of spring. Boy, that's been true. I mean, we're 4 weeks into him practicing. This is week 4 of him practicing. So they continue to be very, very patient with this. So I don't know. Maybe I'll hear something or see something that'll make me think differently. But after just a brief Wednesday observation, I'm not thinking it's a slam dunk he's out there on Sunday.
Just make sure you search through the Darius Leonard or Shaquille Leonard liked tweets on Twitter. That may give you some inclination.
Yeah, that's probably always a safe route to go with. Okay, let's begin here, Eddie. I want to begin with T.Y. Hilton. And as I drove back down here to our studio, I thought about going past Lucas Oil Stadium because I think we're in the midst of the T.Y. banner going from thanks for the memories for a week to I think just being removed.
To the horseshoe?
I assume will it be a horseshoe? I thought it would be Jonathan Taylor.
Oh, that would be my guess too. But sometimes they don't have them ready yet.
Yeah, sometimes they do throw up the old horseshoe.
Yeah,
for the time being. And I'm sure Eddie, you saw his agent's tweet from a couple of days ago.
I did not.
Did you not see that? Okay, Michael Katz, his agent, tweeted a couple ghost emojis, and then TY like 13 times. Pull that up, Eddie, because I want to see if he's had any update on that or anything like that. But when I first saw it, I'm thinking, oh boy, agents don't typically tweet much. When they do, it's about a client.
What's his Twitter handle? Do you know?
Michael Katz is his name.
With a K, C?
With a K, yeah. I could probably look it up. NFL agent Katz. So, I'm thinking to myself, oh boy, is this something? Is this TUI coming back? What is it? Then you had Tampa Bay signing Cole Beasley. Was it some of that? You're trying to read into things, and it's probably just a waste of time. But I guess I bring up TUI to think the Thanks for the Memories banner, it being brought down. If this is it for TUI Hilton, whether it be in Indianapolis or whether it be in the NFL, that's me. I'm standing. I'm clapping. I just think it's an incredible career. And I don't like to just throw that around. I think it's one of the more impressive Colts careers. And I know that might sound weird, but this dude was a late third-round pick. He didn't have the body type that a lot of NFL people want in a receiver. I mean, I would count the Colts' current general manager in that group. And as much as T.Y. Hilton's injuries, I think played a little bit of a bigger role than maybe they should have late in his career. At one point, Eddie, he played 94 of 95 games and played through a lot of shit and played pretty darn good football. Led the league in receiving in 2016. I went back to that 2012 draft. You want to hear some names?
Oh, yeah. Give them to me.
Justin Blackmon. Michael Floyd. Kendall Wright.
That's Notre Dame grad. Michael Floyd.
Easy now. A.J. Jenkins. Brian Quick. Stephen Hill. The last two names sound like they're running for Carmel School Board. I mean, those are the first 6 wideouts taken in that draft.
I can't even tell you any of them besides Blackmon and Floyd that had any relevance in the NFL.
If you combine all their numbers, Eddie, I don't know if they get to Hilton's, nearly 10,000 yards in his career. It was an awful wide receiver draft class. T.Y. is easily the class of that. Some things stand out, and Eddie, feel free to interject on any T.Y. memories, but just the outright dominance in Houston. When you think about Indianapolis and Houston over the last decade, they've probably been the closest thing to a rivalry in the AFC South. I guess Indy and Tennessee would maybe fall into that category here as of late, but I think Indy and Houston had some of that. Watson, for the years that he was starting there, would have been that. And hell, Houston had some sort of relevancy even when they had Osweiler and, Watt was, of course, spearheading a lot of that and DeAndre Hopkins and all that. But for you to just be that dominant of a player on the road in the division, you just don't take that for granted. And obviously with the lack of success you've had in the AFC South lately, maybe it's become more apparent for me. Obviously the game you remember the most is the clown mask.
Yeah.
And that 2018 playoff game, the playoff win, the lone playoff win in the Reich Ballard era. And for T.Y. Hilton, a man that didn't chirp a whole lot, for him to chirp, for him to tell an equipment manager, go to Party City in Houston and get me a clown mask, and then for him to back it up. Remember, early in that game, on the first drive of the game, T.Y. down the middle of the field for 40 or 50 yards or whatever it was from Luck, and that was a message to Houston. I'm going to talk, and now I'm going to walk. And you hear wide receivers talk a whole lot. It's the walking that doesn't always happen. And again, T.Y. did it in that moment. Some other just memories that pop into my head about T.Y. Obviously, the Chief comeback playoff win.
I was there.
Him getting behind the defense for the game winner.
Yeah.
What a great ball by Luck, and obviously what T.Y. did. That probably was his coming out moment to the entire NFL, Eddie. But I'll point to a game earlier in that season that I don't know if a lot of people recall, but I just felt like that was his coming out moment.
Which year was that?
So that was 2013.
Yep.
The Colts had several big wins in that season. They beat San Francisco on the road, Trent Richardson's first game. They beat Peyton in their own building, in Peyton's comeback here. And they beat Seattle at home. And think back to that Seattle game. Obviously, a lot of its build is Russell Wilson versus Andrew Luck. But, that's a Legion of Boom. And T.Y. torched Richard Sherman and company in that game.
5 for 140 and 2 touchdowns.
I was going to say, I thought he had 2 scores. 5 for 140?
Yep, and 2 touchdowns.
That's such a Hilton stat line.
I would even go before that, KB. I hate to interject during your monologue here, but that Miami game, second week of the season, 6 catches, 124 yards.
And do you have like his game log? I mean, he certainly had some moments as a rookie. I don't want to act like he didn't, but I just felt like to do it against that type of defense, Eddie, Seattle was the class of the NFL defensively at that time. To do it against that group, obviously he led the league in receiving in 2016. And, I was thinking about this. If you were going to rank the greatest wide receivers in NFL history under 5'11", obviously Deshaun Jackson will be on the list. Obviously Steve Smith would be on the list.
Yeah.
Who else?
Cooper Kupp. He's on that path.
Is he under 5? I thought Cooper Kupp's 6 foot.
Oh, well, he may be listed 6 feet tall, but no way he's 6 feet tall.
I guess let's just go off listed weight. I guess Hilton's up there in my eyes. Wes Welker.
Yeah.
You'd put up there. Santana Moss had a really good career. Yeah, I always thought Edelman was a tad bigger. But, yeah, we're obviously getting into technicalities here with some height. But what I'm getting at is kind of what I said to lead off. For a guy his size to be as durable as he was for as long as he was, and then to produce at a really high level for a decade, it is a great, great Colts career. Him and Mathis would be guys that I immediately think of drafted outside of round 1 and round 2 that had just incredible careers for this franchise. Jeff Saturday, of course, would fall into that group as an undrafted guy. I'm forgetting others and probably should go back to the 80s and early 90s. But if this is it for T.Y., incredible. Absolutely incredible. He seems content. His son's tearing it up for Zionsville. And we'll see if he ever plays again, but right now it does not look like that's going to be here in Indy.
Yeah, his game log rookie year, you're asking about that. He had 5 100-yard games, including his second game in the NFL against Jacksonville.
And he missed the opener. He did not play against Chicago. He was hurt in that game.
Correct.
And then I think from then on, that's when he did the 94 and 95 stretch. And, Reggie tore his ACL against Denver, right, in 2013? I thought it was.
Yeah, because it was the
Peyton comeback game.
Yeah, it was on a 4th down, wasn't it?
Boy, your memory would be better than mine.
I remember it because I was there.
Yeah, that to me was just kind of the passing of the torch almost, of Reggie to T.Y. of like, hey, this is now you as the number 1 wide out here. So let's move on from T.Y. Hilton. Let's head next to kicker. And is it just me, or does it seem like Rodrigo Blankenship got cut 3 years ago?
Right.
Yeah, just with everything that's transpired, it seems like eons ago. I want to begin here, Eddie. You have that clip pulled up?
I have it pulled up, yeah.
This is a clip from... We did a podcast just before training camp started on the position battles to watch. And I threw in kicker as the final position battle. But I think you can hear in the tone of my voice here just the skepticism I had on, like, is this even a battle? To me, it wasn't like Nick Cross versus Rodney McLeod. It didn't really classify as that. So we're going to play this clip. Again, this is from late July, right before training camp started on, and I say in quotes, Rodrigo Blankenship versus Jake Verity. Hot Rod didn't miss a single kick in training camp last year.
Yeah.
So I feel like the issue for me just comes down to very specific game settings because, you've been out to training camp practices, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
It's not full bore in these kicking drills at all. So when you're kicking in a game and you're thinking, oh, man, they've got, 6'8" Calais Campbell on the other side. I got to get the ball high. I'm kicking from 48, crowd noise, play clocks. There's a lot of other factors that, and you could say this about a lot of positions in training camp that are different than a game, but I think kicker especially, I know it might be like, well, he's perfect in camp, he should be great in the season, is different. So we'll see. Again, Eddie, I was like, wait, is this really the competition? They were so irate with Hot Rod getting hurt in the Baltimore pregame. Basically, Hot Rod and Justin Tucker are kicking before the game starts last year. And how there's always that moment pregame where it's just the kickers on the field.
Yeah.
You know, guys are back in the locker room. National anthem's about ready to get started. You know, a lot of people are starting to settle into their seats, and it's just kind of the kickers. Mm-hmm. And it's deep kicks, I feel like, always with the kickers at that point. And a hot rod, I'm thinking to myself, God, he's acting like, you know, he's Justin Tucker over there, and he's testing out the leg, and sure enough, he gets hurt. And that might seem like kind of a minuscule thing to people, but I think it's an intel into kind of how Hot Rod is wired. Super analytical, and I just think his ability to kind of block out stuff is difficult. I don't think he was ever totally comfortable in how he was as a kicker. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I'll make probably a stupid golf analogy, but like, you know, there are golfers in the PGA Tour that can totally be in their comfort zone driving the ball 280 yards, which by PGA Tour standards is not very long. They know that that's their game. They're not going to deviate from it. That's who they are. It seemed like in that moment with Hot Rod, he was trying to drive at 320, trying to drive at 330, trying to do some things that's just out of him in his comfort zone. And I think that just kind of tells a story about things getting to him. And he's not like a Matt Prater kicker who just kind of just goes with the flow. And I think it's such a position that you're on an island, you're isolated from so many people during practice. You know, you've got to be incredibly mentally strong to kick at an extremely high level. So I think that injury, the Colts are just flat out mad at him for it. Of like, dude, you got hurt because you were trying to imitate, you know, the greatest kicker in NFL history, different than the clutchest kicker in NFL history, that being Adam Vinatieri. And so obviously Michael Badgley kicks. They stick with Badgley. I think the reason why they didn't bring Badgley back is they wanted to try. They thought Badgley was too similar to Hot Rod, basically. They felt like he didn't have that length element that they were looking for. So here comes Jake Verity, the mythical creature that is Jake Verity, who you were out there. You were out there at Grand Park. I mean, hell, he definitely kicks the ball hard.
Oh, yeah.
And it sounds different when it comes off his foot, but he also kicked a few balls to like Noblesville and you know, Pike Township. Like, you know, accuracy was a major issue. And I just felt like all off season long, they never seriously thought about kicker. Like Verity, I mean, you look at his college stats and they won't wow you. And this is where, you know, some of the roster building, I guess maybe just the competition, is head scratching to me. You watched the playoffs unfold last year. As an organization, while this might sound like a laughable subject, how do you not see what Cincinnati did and then come into your building, hell, after the divisional round, after the championship game, after the Super Bowl, and say, are we doing the right thing at kicker? Should we draft a kicker? Like, these are all questions. The offseason is about asking 1,332 questions and seeing what everybody you trust in your building believes in. And some of them might be idiotic questions, but you just ask them and you challenge yourself with that thinking. And I'm not acting like drafting a kicker would cure all, and I get it. You draft a kicker and it looks weird, and there are some drafted kickers that have definitely not worked out. And you look at what Cleveland probably is the perfect example of it. So obviously, Evan McPherson does what he did for Cincinnati. I think he was, a fifth-round pick? Mm-hmm. So look at Cleveland. They look at themselves as a playoff team. They see what Cincinnati did. They're thinking, hey, we need to make a move that maybe separates us from the middle pack, or, you know, I guess just a little bit above the middle pack in the AFC. What do? They cut ties with Chase McLaughlin, ironically enough. They draft Cade York. And in week 1, 58-yarder, boom. Now, I know York missed one last week, but like that is the element of, I just never felt like the Colts offered Blankenship real competition. I thought, I was like, does this dude have blackmail on people in the organization? Like, he was an undrafted free agent. It's not like he's, you know, Mason Crosby, Will Lutz. These are some names of kickers, Eddie, that I feel like in the last few years have had some ruts, have had some, you know, tough moments. But they also have had a dozen game winners on their resume and kicked big time in the playoffs and things like that. Hot Rod didn't have that. His kick in the playoff is off the upright in Buffalo, and is really a play that right after the Kamoko Cherry offsides penalty that were huge deciders in that close game in Buffalo. The other thing I want to point out was training camp kicking, insert golf analogy here, to me is almost like warming up on the driving range before a round. Eddie, you watched the field goal kickers kick, right, at Grand Park? The 11 on defense, they do not run after the kick like you saw Minkah Fitzpatrick do a few weeks back. There is no attempt to block a kick. And I bring that up because with Hot Rod, I think a lot of it comes down to the live moments. Think back to the Baltimore game and Calais Campbell blocking that kick, or the Green Bay kick that he had, I think it was Green Bay in the regular season, when he kicked it like short from 50. Maybe it wasn't Green Bay, maybe it was somebody else. Like, he had a kick from like 50 and kicked it short. I mean, NFL kickers cannot be short from 50 yards. And he admitted that he chunked it. Like he thought about getting it high above that defensive line or, whatever, the kick block team, and he just chunked it. And so you watch training camp, and in the back of your mind, the human element is there of just like a red jersey for a quarterback in training camp. Hey, they're not really rushing. I can kick it normal. I could probably kick it a little lower than normal. And just like last year, I mean, he was perfect in camp last year. He wasn't perfect this year, but he was still pretty good. I kind of walked out of Grand Park and I thought, well, good camp for Hot Rod, but does it mean anything? And I know I beat a little bit into the ground about them not kicking in the Buffalo preseason game. Remember that? They had a couple moments there where they could have tried like a 53, 54-yarder.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, this is a great opportunity to run him out there. And maybe you run him out there, maybe he misses that one. And now you think to yourself, should we have him kick next week? Should we look at that kicker waiver wire a little bit more? I asked Chris Ballard at the end of August. I go, you still looking at kickers? He said no. I thought to myself, okay, we'll see how it goes. And then week 1 happens. And if the leash was going to be that short, like you literally cut him after one missed kick, then why wasn't the attention more there in the offseason? So that's just kind of where I'm at with it. I probably have gone too long on it, Eddie, but I just wanted to make sure that it was brought up of in a league that has so much parity, a high-level field goal kicker is such a weapon.
Oh, yeah.
Such a weapon. And a 42-yarder indoors that he misses in Houston, that's a 90% success rate. Indoors, 42 yards. And he shanked it.
You were right on the game, by the way.
Was it Green Bay?
Yeah, I think.
Now, he also hit a game winner. Was that Green Bay?
Yes.
Was that
overtime game?
Yeah.
I think that missed field goal would have won in regulation.
Yeah.
No, because Green Bay kicked one to tie to force overtime.
Yeah, I just thought a lot of it was just kind of a little bit mental with him of like, man, I need to hit low on the ball to get it up so it doesn't get blocked. And then all of a sudden you're sacrificing some distance with that. And, Chase McLaughlin, ironically enough, Eddie, I thought he kicked great when Adam Vinatieri had his awful 2019 season.
Also, that's another part of it. You have Jake Verity, and if you really like his leg, there's somebody here in Indiana that's one of the best to ever do it that you probably could have called up. He's like, hey, can you help this guy?
Do a little coaching action?
Yeah.
I thought McLaughlin, frankly, should have won the job in 2020. Him and Hot Rod were in a kicking competition in camp. And remember, you didn't have a preseason that year. And I guess it's just not something that maybe a lot of fans know or realize. And I'm going to report the stats that I see in training camp. Like, they are somewhat relevant, but it's still a walk-through feel to those kicks. So we'll see how Chase McLaughlin does. Obviously, his family had to be thrilled with his performance on Saturday because he was only needed to do one kickoff.
You mean Sunday?
Sunday, and he maintained his job for another week, and they cut the dude from Arizona off the practice squad. So this is Chase McLaughlin's job for the foreseeable future there. But similar to left tackle, I don't know what Hot Rod had done to earn just kind of as long of a leash as he had. It's just not real competition. Okay, maybe don't draft one. All right. What about signing the top undrafted guy? What about going out and making a move for a veteran kicker? I mean, again, Jake Verity's resume in college was like 60-some%, especially from longer distances. And as soon as he missed that kick in Buffalo, missed the extra point, it's like, all right, I mean, why is he here? You got anything else on kicker, or have we lost everybody that was listening to this point?
I think we're good on kicker.
All right, man. Let's get in Twitter questions before we do a prediction on Sunday.
19 of them.
Let's go.
Here's number one. Comes from Rodney. I need to hear Frank explain this. If they found out about Pierce and Pittman on Saturday, let's restart that all. I need to hear Frank explain this. If they found out about Pierce on Friday and Pittman on Saturday, why was there no practice Friday? You don't have to hit in practice. You can run 7-on-7 and form a game plan with the guys you've got. That makes no sense to me. What I mean is this. If he truly thought they were both locked in on Thursday, but found that not to be the case on Friday, how can they not attempt to adjust on the fly?
Yeah, I'm with Rodney on this. You know, Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman were up in the air. So I think when you're assembling a game plan, you have a game plan, but then you got to make sure you got some backup thoughts if those guys can't go, if they're limited, or if they get hurt during the game, they find, And to me, this gets back to the usage of Nyheim Hines and the lack of usage with him. Think about Hines, Eddie. Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't he your most experienced skill player?
Yeah. Is it
always out there? Taking wide receiver reps. I mean, he knows the playbook. Nyheim Hines is a guy that knows a lot of roles. I think he could handle a sudden change of, hey, Nyheim, we're actually going to use you a little bit more. It's not like you're asking a practice squad guy on Saturday morning to get 20 touches in a game. And I just don't love the predetermining of practice. Like, oh, yeah, on Tuesday we decided we're not going to practice on Friday. See how the week plays out? And if Thursday's practice doesn't go well, then you're practicing on Friday. It just, the whole thing is odd. And, Frank's explanation on Monday about the lack of Hines usage, it frankly made zero sense to me. And honestly was a bit shocking, a bit worrisome of like, man, all of a sudden because Pittman and Pierce, it showed up on Friday or Saturday that they weren't going to play, that meant that you couldn't expand Hines' role. You've just gone through a couple COVID seasons. If that doesn't teach you that you should have backup plan after backup plan after backup plan, I don't know what does. So, yeah, that one to me made zero sense.
So Pittman was ruled out about 12:45 on Saturday.
And again, that's official. Eddie, as soon as he doesn't practice on Thursday, you're gathering as an organization and saying, guys, Pittman's a little bit up in the air. Contingency plan. If he can't go, I want 21 to get more of a role.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly you had him involved heavily in the first series of the game. It's disappointing when you look at the snap count afterwards and you see Kylan Granson and Desmond Patman and those guys out snapping Hines as significantly as they did. And the fact that he, how do you not look at that first play of the game and be like, oh boy, that's some stuff we should come back to a little bit more.
To me, what stood out is, I don't want to get too far into this since we have so many questions. Marcus Brady spoke yesterday, and he said, when we found about Pitt, we met together on Saturday, changed the game plan a little bit. And then you listen to what Frank had to say on Monday. He said the low snap count for the Colts offense, he said you only had about 47-ish meaningful snaps, and about the first 15, you had Nyheim scripted in there. So it's like, if you had to change it, and you guys came together and you changed it, how the hell is he not on the field more?
Yeah. I mean, if you're ranking the skill players you had, and what also is wild is Campbell doesn't get a target till the end of the game. If you're going to tell me the start of the day, no Pittman, no Pierce, 9 carries for Jonathan Taylor, Paris Campbell doesn't make any sort of statement in the game until an offensive pass interference penalty in the fourth quarter, I would have said, hello, Nyheim Hines.
Yeah.
Hello. And instead it was like how Adele says hello in that one song, kind of fades off like that.
Hello.
Yeah. Great impression there.
Thank you. Mark, I was never a Wentz fan, but it looks to me that some people may owe him an apology. Can't blame the wide receiver or tight end group yesterday, or I should say this past weekend, because they didn't improve from last year. Just saying.
Well, Mark, I make the argument they've gotten worse. I mean, Carson Wentz had Jack Doyle, T.Y. Hilton, and Zach Pascal. I mean, if you look at Washington's pass catchers, we did it on Monday. I mean, it's a far different group. Do you ever pay attention to those next-gen stats? Do you ever look into that?
I do a little bit.
So, again, it's kind of some deeper analytics on each game. And I went back and looked at the numbers from week 2. And there's a stat called aggressiveness, which basically it tracks how many of your pass attempts, so as a quarterback, how many of your pass attempts are thrown into tight coverage. So basically, if the defender, I think the criteria is if the defender is within 1 yard or less of the target at the time of the pass, completion or incompletion. Matt Ryan's aggressiveness percentage was 30% on Sunday. I know that might not be super relevant to a lot of people. That was 5% higher than any quarterback in the NFL. So basically, Matt Ryan was throwing into tighter windows than anyone else in the NFL by a decent margin on Sunday. And in a more of an elementary way to say it, those dudes weren't getting open. They weren't creating separation. And I think that just, again, continues to add to where you're at right now from a skill position standpoint.
Boy, you can get really lost in the weeds when you get on Next Gen Stats.
Yeah, you can. I try not to get too deep into it, but I do think some of the stuff's pretty good.
Joel is next. He says, thanks for the pod on Monday. He was one of the best yet. Thank you for that. Something I want your opinion on. You said multiple times that folks don't give Frank Reich enough credit as a play caller and offensive mind. I would ask, what has he done to earn our trust as a play caller? The national media especially has this narrative that Frank is an offensive guru, noting the Super Bowl win in Philly as evidence. The thing is, Doug Peterson was calling the plays. Frank never had experience in this league as a play caller or a head coach, and he now is doing both. In my mind, he has not proven to be a good play caller, as we as fans time and time again wonder what the hell he's thinking, but you said we don't give him enough credit. Change my mind.
There we go. I like it, Joel. Trust me, I love when people challenge me and vice versa. Honestly, it's what I love about how interactive this podcast is. So I genuinely appreciate the question, Joel. Eddie, I'm going to start here. I think in the football world, I'm not sure there's an element that fans critique more than play calling. Like, I'm a big Notre Dame fan, and oh my gosh, these people want Tommy Rees thrown in the South Bend River. I don't even know if there is a South Bend River. Maybe it's the St. Joe's River up there. It's like, oh my gosh, every fourth down call I feel like is live or die, life or death. It's like, one little breakdown from your right guard, they could have a genius play call, and all of a sudden, it just seems like there's so much at stake. I think the art of play calling is very difficult. Very difficult. Trends with how you handle play calls, setting things up. There's obviously the defense is trying to execute their own version of a chess match. And again, one subtle breakdown, and you're screwed. And to Joel's point, I hear this take from a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people listening to this podcast, and I know we had some YouTube commenters, Eddie, that were like, oh, Kevin thinks Frank's a decent play caller. Well, that just changed my opinion of what Kevin thinks. So I know that there's a decent amount of people out here that have this sort of take. Do I think offensive guru should be the phrase thrown out there with Frank Reich? No. Do I think he's an above-average play caller? I do. Eddie, the Colts, under Frank Reich, where they finished in points scored per game. 2018, 5th. 2019, 16th. 2020, 9th. And last year, 9th.
Top 10.
I mean, think about that. Luck, Brissett, Rivers, Wentz. Now, we can separate two things. Is the constant change at quarterback an issue? Yes. That is a topic that we don't need to discuss. That's not relevant to this question. What's relevant here is you've changed quarterbacks on an annual basis, and yet year in and year out, you've been a average to above average scoring offense, and you finish in the top 10 in 3 of those seasons. And I don't think anyone would sit here and say you had top 10 talent at wide receiver or tight end in any of those seasons. I mean, T.Y. was trailing. Michael Pittman's had a really nice kind of like 1 year probably, maybe back into his rookie season, then obviously last year. Certainly your offensive line has been good, and Jonathan Taylor helps in a great way. But I guarantee you, Eddie, if I would have stopped a Colt fan on the street, if I would have stopped Joel, and Joel, I'm not attacking you. Joel and I have a good back and forth. But if I stopped Joel in the street in 2018 and said, Joel, you're going to have a new quarterback for 5 straight years. Your best pass-catching weapons will be approaching 30-year-old T.Y. Hilton and approaching 30-year-old Jack Doyle. Would you take these point totals on an annual basis? I think you would.
Yeah.
It's not perfect. Offensive guru, no. But I do think he's an above-average play caller in this league. Now, to the point we just had with the question earlier, the Hines usage on Saturday, again, that's malpractice. Or Sunday, I don't know why I keep saying Saturday. That's malpractice. That's stuff that cannot happen. But I think for the most part, Frank gives you a better than average chance from an offensive standpoint. And I know people will disagree with that. I like to think that those numbers are pretty substantial. And sure, some turnovers play into that. Those obviously help you. But, I mean, we're talking 5th, 9th, 3 of those 4 years. Pretty good numbers.
Yep, I agree with you there. This is from Colt. Congrats on the baby, Kevin.
Hey, Colt. He told me this, Eddie. He said he's named after the Colts.
Really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Colt was saying that he cooked for the team during their Super Bowl run. Can
he cook for him again?
I will have to dial him up. He had another connection. I forget, like a Freeney related one. But yeah, Colt seems like a good dude.
He says, I have almost a 2-year-old twin boys, and it's incredible.
I love it, Colt. Love it. Twin boys, man. Woo-hoo-hoo.
Good luck
breaking up those fights.
He also says, congrats to Maddie. No epidural.
Can you believe that?
He said, definitely harder than sitting through the nauseating performances.
Well, I think Maddie would agree wholeheartedly with you, Colt, and she'd probably want to insert a cuss word after that. 2
questions. I'll let you answer this first one, then I'll get the second one. Everyone contributes the regression of the O-line to Anthony Costanzo retiring, but I'm certain it all started after 2018 with the firing of Dave Guglielmo, the offensive line coach.
Yeah, Googe, the old firing there. Yeah, I felt this about D-line, Eddie, because there's been a lot of turnover there. Either you don't have the right ingredients or the chef's not using the ingredients right. And, what's going on with that O-line? Because for the most part, you kind of settled on, 3 of the 5, Kelly, Nelson, and Braden Smith, at, probably at the quarter pole. Maybe it was probably the halfway point of that 2018 season. And Googe was, if I'm not mistaken, he was one of the McDaniels assistants. I think Matt Eberflus fell into that group as well. And yeah, he just didn't see eye to eye with Frank. And if you look at Googe's resume, it's been a frequent stopper around the league. So maybe there's a little bit of something there. But yeah, I think it's worth pointing out. And I've thought this. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think necessarily the Colts would make that sort of move. But anytime you have struggles, someone becomes a scapegoat.
Hot Rod.
Hot Rod could fall into that category. I think back to Pep Hamilton when he got fired at the midseason and Rob Straczynski was promoted. Again, I'm not thinking that this is going to happen anytime soon, but I'm looking at things. I'm like, well, O-line is underperforming. Could they fire Chris Strasser and promote Kevin Mawae? I don't know. Again, you just, when you've had struggles like they've had, you just kind of throw stuff at the wall and see if any of it makes sense. But yeah, I think O-line has clearly been an issue.
Number 2 from Colt. DeForest was a solid performer when we got him, as was Yannick Ngakoue. Why can't the general manager, coach, and owner step in and demand a 30% blitz rate from Bradley? More man. Why can't the owner, GM, demand Hines and Taylor get 50% play calling touches? This team has holes, but also has talent. Why don't the higher-ups take control of the coaching deficiencies?
One thing I didn't mention on Monday, that going back and watching the game, I want to reiterate, and this kind of falls into the What is Frank Reich's title?
Head coach.
Joel wanted to ask offensive play caller. What is his title, Eddie?
Head coach.
Thank you. If I'm Frank Reich last Monday, and I don't know, maybe he did this. If I'm Frank Reich last Monday, I walk down to Gus Bradley's office, and I say, Gus, you weren't here last year, but I'm going to sit down and let's watch the opening drive of the loss to Jacksonville from last season. And I sit here and I say to him, that is a 50% passer that we let complete every single pass on the opening drive. And while all those Jacksonville guys were thinking, man, that pina colada is going to taste real good in the Caribbean come tomorrow when our season's over, they got hope right there, right at 1:08 p.m. Spiro Dita said, oh boy, what a start for the Jags. Trevor Lawrence, perfect on the opening drive. And they got hope. And if I was Frank Reich, I would say to Gus Bradley, and I'd make it very clear, this is what happened last year to win. I think it's fair to say so far in the NFL, Trevor Lawrence has been an average quarterback.
Fair.
Maybe not even average. Demand this cannot happen again. Like, I don't care what scheme you want to develop, but we let Trevor Lawrence dictate to us. We hoped Trevor would make mistakes. We need to dictate to him. We need to disrupt timing. We need to, whatever, from a blitzing standpoint, whatever you want to cook up that is going to disrupt and really force this rookie quarterback or second-year quarterback to continue to make a lot of the mistakes he's made so far in his 19-game NFL career. That did not happen. So I think this falls into Colt's question of again, when you have that title as head coach, to me, I don't, maybe I'm dead wrong. I just think some of that's lacking.
I can see that a little bit too.
And again, when it's so glaring and so obvious, and last year, the season finale, that has got to, I know it, Frank thinks about it endlessly. Hell, you sit there at Jim Irsay's office, how does it not? 3 hours after that game ends. And for then the same opening drive to play out, and frankly, it felt like the same game. I don't know about you, Eddie. I felt like watching that game. I felt like it was the same exact game.
Matt Taylor and Rick Venturi said the same thing on the call on the radio.
This is the same exact game. The interceptions look similar from Ryan and Wentz. Taylor going nowhere. Ryan under siege. Marvin Jones doing his thing.
This question comes from Zach. He wants to congratulate you on the baby boy again.
Thank you, Zach.
Halfway through the pod, I'm assuming on Mondays, and he's wondering if these losses caused the team to have some urgency and sign an OBJ type of player or make some type of move. They normally wouldn't, but with jobs on the line, you have to do something.
When is OBJ healthy?
Probably November.
Don't they still have his locker up with the Rams?
Yeah, there was a report that came out yesterday or earlier today that his final three teams that he's probably going to be deciding between are the Giants, the Bills, and the Rams.
Give those to me again.
Giants, Bills, Rams.
Boy, there's some juice in that trio. The 2-0 Giants. Again, when is he healthy? Does he want to come here? That's probably the bigger question. If you've watched the Colts so far and you were Odell Beckham, would you want to come here?
Nope. Especially, in the offseason, he had that tweet about, Matty Ice going to cook it up or something in Indy. Or I don't know. I can't remember what it was. Andrew, hey, KB, my question is, how can a team with multiple Pro Bowlers come out so lifeless through the first 2 weeks? And is the slow start an indictment of Frank Reich and Chris Ballard's roster building philosophy?
Again, everyone to blame. I wrote an article, posted up on 1075thefan.com, top, bottom. I'll go over, Eddie. Remember we did the podcast right before the season started. What am I most confident in? What am I least confident in?
Yep.
About this Colts team. I went back and looked at the least confident. Number 1, supporting Michael Pittman.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Number 2, offensive line elite, question mark.
Okay.
And number 3, playing with a bullseye. Touchdown favorite, field goal favorite.
Tie.
Yeah. So the worries preseason have shown up, I would say, in a very clear way here, week 1 and week 2. So when you factor that in, top, down.
Hillary,
Hillary, good to hear from you.
Obviously, talent is an issue, but the lack of energy we see from the head coach completely reflects on the team. Do you think Frank's demeanor influences the team's vibes?
Yeah.
We got into a little bit of this on Monday.
Yeah, we did, Hillary. And I want to kind of take you guys behind the scenes a little bit to today's press conference. And if any of you will watch today's press conference, I don't know how frequently you guys do watch the press conferences. Do they do them live, Eddie?
No.
Okay. So you would have to go back on YouTube or
It's usually about
.com or
4 hours, 5 hours later after it happened.
when they post them.
Yeah, so it should be up probably, well, as we record this, it's 3:53, so any minute.
Yeah. I sat there, and I don't think I tweeted one time during the press conference, which is pretty rare for me. I usually send a couple tweets during the presser. But I really just kind of wanted to soak it all in. And I sat there and thought to myself, this is the most animated I've ever seen Frank Reich in a Wednesday presser.
Animated how?
Talking a little bit faster than normal. Talking a little bit louder than normal. A little bit more body language, voice inflection, gestures. Now, people will go and watch this, and they'll be like, wait, what? That is what you call animation? I've sat in now, 100 Frank Reich press conferences. So I think I have a decent idea of what his normal demeanor is. Mm-hmm. It is subdued, very subdued. There's times that the press conference gets over, and I'll go over to a Colts PR staff member. I'm like, everything okay with Frank? Seriously, it's like you just want to make sure everything's okay. He is a very subdued individual. And so I know I'm going like uber psychiatrist here with some of this, but the message, what he said today was no different than what he said. We believe in our process. It was very similar to kind of what it's early in the season. So nobody is going to like the words, I think, that came out of Frank Reich's mouth today if fans want to hear different stuff. But body language was different for me. And I kind of sat there, and honestly, my locker room time today was spent more of just kind of thinking back to the presser. And I'm like, this is the first probably serious amount of adversity in Frank Reich's career, head coaching career. Think about it. The line in Vegas right now, I think he's second on the list for the first coach to be fired in the NFL this season behind Matt Rule. When they started 1-5 in 2018, and you brought that up today, I don't think that is comparable to this start. That's honeymoon period, 1-5 in 2018.
Yeah.
Totally new defense. Andrew Luck hadn't played football in a year. Like, that to me is nothing like what this is right now with these last 4 games dating back to last season. So I guess, Hillary, I'm sharing all of that to just kind of paint a little bit of a picture. And I asked Frank this, where's the balance of you as a head coach want to keep your message consistent, but yet the results are not there. So do you deviate? Do you alter? Do you show more emotion? And we kind of touched on this more on Monday with that. He said this, rah-rah speeches, that to me doesn't really matter. The Saturday night, he goes, if you guys would have watched the Saturday night speech before the Jacksonville game, you would have thought we won by 40. And I think in the NFL, I tend to agree. Sure, are there outliers? Are there probably moments where guys have just been blown away? Sure. But I just think in the NFL, for the most part, it's a lot of self-motivation. Now, I'll go back to the earlier points that I've made, though, of a canceling of a Friday practice predetermined, not using Nyheim Hines, your defense having the same sort of performance they did in the season finale against Trevor Lawrence. Those are more of the CEO type things where I'm kind of like, demeanor, nice guy. Eddie, you can probably point to several head coaches, Tony Dungy probably being one of them, that were on that scale and had great success. So I don't know. It's a little bit of a part of it, sure, but I don't necessarily think it's everything.
JJ, should the Colts trade Jonathan Taylor? It's a shame to waste his talent on such a mediocre team. Colts have many needs, including quarterback, and a few additional draft picks will help.
Yeah, JJ, I'm all for collecting more picks, but yeah, it's not happening. Running back trades in the NFL don't happen of that magnitude. Yeah, it's not. No, Jonathan Taylor's not being traded.
Look at Kareem Hunt, for example. Requested and demanded for a trade in preseason. Didn't happen.
They just Doesn't happen.
Daniel, now we have played the first 2 games of the season. I want to ask you the same question I asked you before the season started and get your updated thoughts. Thanks again and keep up the great work. Where are the Colts going to be if they don't start 2-0 against the Jags and the Texans? I see these 2 teams as must-wins, and anything less would be a disastrous start to the season. I don't want to think about it, but if we start the season 0-2, seats will be running red hot. And I remember him asking this question too.
Yeah, it is funny. Daniel, you're certainly onto something with that. Colts just sent out their injury report. 52 of 53 practiced. So that's good news there.
Good.
Bernard Ryman, which we mentioned earlier, he's the only one that did not practice. So limited for Buckner, Ngakoue, and Pittman. And everybody else full. So pretty good injury report. A little long, though. 3, 6, 9, 10 names, something like that. Anyways, yeah, Daniel, you were onto something. The seat should be hot. And again, September firings are rare. And Eddie, I do think we have to focus on this too. The Colts are a bad football team right now. That can be true. And I can also say this. When I see Vegas have the Colts as the favorite in the AFC South right now, I probably think, well, I guess. You know, and like September firings are rare. They're especially rare when you're in a division where if you look at the over-under on win totals for the 4 teams, is anyone over 7.5 right now?
No.
Colts are at 7.5. That's their over-under. I'd assume Tennessee is probably 7.5 or 6.5. And Jacksonville is 6.5, and Houston's like 4.5.
Yeah.
It just so again, I there are levels of embarrassment for Jim Irsay, and I touched on this on Monday. The next level to me could be on the horizon in that now you're playing at home. I'm not like predicting the Colts are going to lose by 40 on Sunday, but like now you're at home. Now your home fan base reacts, and the owner's in the building for that. So honestly, the home fans control a lot of this. But what happens with Kansas City? What happens with Tennessee? Did you hear Jim Irsay's comments this offseason?
Yeah.
He did not hold back in talking about Tennessee.
Thank God A.J. Brown's gone.
He did not hold back. And then as I mentioned on Monday, you know what you've got coming up here in a month, and that would be one Carson Wentz back in your building.
Next question is from Matt. Based on what we know of Frank Reich, some of the things we've heard him say in the past and some of the decisions he's both made on and off the field, should we be concerned that he, and possibly Ballard as well, rely too heavily upon faith and or belief in players and situations versus tangible performances and results? I think about some head-scratching moments and decisions where they've stubbornly stuck with a player, a play call, or a philosophy when it seems obvious to everyone else that it's not working. Are they judging by what is true or what they want to be true? His example was the wide receivers.
Eddie, read that last sentence for me again.
Are they judging by what is true or what they want to be true?
Man. It's kind of jarring to hear that.
That's a fair question.
Boy, it's totally fair. Matt, it is totally fair. I would agree, and I guarantee you if a member of that Colts front office heard that, they'd be like, no, that is not true. But
how preposterous.
I think there are some actions that would lend you to think that the blind loyalty has been there at times. And it has been a little bit. I mean, hell, Hot Rod would be an example of that. We just went over it. Eddie, I'm going to turn on the lights in here. It's so dark.
That's fine.
I guess let's turn it on over here. Yeah, I do. It's one of those things with Frank. I think how you treat Monday through Saturday, Eddie, when you're formulating a game plan and you're behind a closed door, no players are around, you're critical. You're saying to your staff, guys, I don't trust this guy as much as I trust another guy. We need to get him involved. And obviously when you get outside that door and you go see the guy that you don't trust very much in the hallway, you're slapping on the butt and be like, come on, hey, here we go. I got so much faith in you, man. Like, we're going to come to you in a critical moment. You're going to make a big play. But you got to be honest with yourself when you're, again, formulating a game plan.
Yeah.
And, I'm thinking back to, like, those days when, you'd have 8 guys on your basketball team and you have to play everyone at least 2 quarters. Well, just because the kid's on the floor for 2 quarters doesn't mean you're running the picket fence for him. It doesn't mean, hey, clear out here, Billy. We're going to give Billy a little isolation here. No, you're not doing that. So that's where I think, and I'm obviously, being a little tongue-in-cheek here, but that's where I think at times, I go back to the example I used on Monday's pod. I think it was Monday's pod, where I asked Frank in May, is this a key evaluation time for your whiteout group? And he says, yeah, it is, and we'll make a decision after this, but I already know what my answer is going to be to Chris.
Yep.
I mean, what? It's like, why even practice then? That's kind of my thought process with that. So I just think you've got to be so critical with a fine-tooth comb with your entire roster, your entire game plan, and then when Sunday at 1 o'clock hits, you can be as joyous and no one believes in us and it's just us 46 that are dressing on game day and all that, and you can hype up everybody, but there's a reason Michael Pittman plays as many snaps as he does and Desmond Patman plays as many snaps as he does.
Yeah.
So I hope that makes sense. I don't know if that's exactly what you're asking, Matt, but it's kind of what popped into my head.
Yay, Rod, go fight, win.
Yes. Hey, amen. Good team.
Jordan, we've got 9 questions left.
Okay. Sorry we're going long.
Hey, Kevin,
quick.
It's okay. Do you think Ballard has ignored the glaring need to address left tackle so he could keep putting someone out there on the cheap so he could justify paying Quentin Nelson $20 million a year?
Again, for left tackle, Eddie, this is an overtime period. This is a 3 or 4 year argument. I'd argue at least multiple years. I'd argue probably more of a 3 or 4 year issue. Like,
yep.
You can't pay everyone $20 million, obviously, but if you would have found a rookie 2 or 3 years ago, that rookie would be on the end of his contract. You wouldn't necessarily be paying him an absurd amount of money, but maybe that guy would have developed into a starting tackle. And just hearing this question is just reiterating to me the need to hit on rookie contracts. So yeah.
Flippin' and Ben. If the offense continues to heavily rely on Michael Pittman Jr. and Jonathan Taylor, will Ballard be forced to make additions via free agency or trade? Kenny Galladay or Tyler Lockett come to mind?
I mean, be forced, I don't know if I'd use that sort of phrase, but I mean, how do you not? And honestly, when I saw the T.Y. Michael Katz tweet, I'm thinking to myself, did it take that embarrassment for the Colts to go out there and pry T.Y. off the couch and beg him to come back to West 56th Street? We'll obviously see if that happens. And, a trade, you wouldn't necessarily need this. But, again, it's a two-way street. And you got to remember, it wouldn't take major draft capital, I think, especially to get a guy like Galladay. But
he just played 2 snaps in their last game.
Yeah. But in the back of your mind, you still got to think about quarterback in the future and trying to acquire that quarterback and making sure you have enough draft capital to do that.
Colts chatter, a rather lengthy one.
Okay. You can paraphrase if you need to.
There's a couple of questions in here, so we'll do one at a time.
Okay.
First of all, congrats on the birth of your second child.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Hope everything is going well for you guys. Haven't submitted a question in a while, but this disaster has me so confused. I knew it was over when I found out Frank decided not to defer. My question is really just, what the heck is going on? Did all of our all-pro / Pro Bowl / very good players just drop off a cliff, or is this team not prepared?
Yeah, I think we've kind of hit on a decent amount of this. To me, this feels a little different than the other starts, Eddie. This is the worst start for me, based off how you ended last year, the opponents you played these first 2 weeks, and we're sitting here going into week 3, and the Colts have played one good quarter of football. Now, we're obviously going to find out. Like, right now, they are not a good football team.
Right.
Now, it's also September 21st, so it's a long way to go. But right now, it's not like, oh, man, there's been some nice flashes here early in the season. I mean, the flashes have been a comeback in the fourth quarter against the Texans. Like, there were no flashes against Jacksonville. So, yeah, again, we're gonna find out.
This is from James. Hey, Kevin, wow, speaking is hard. Hey, Kevin, huge congrats on baby number 2.
Appreciate it, James.
Just a quick question for the next pod. After that disgraceful loss, did we underestimate the importance of Mark Glowinski? The O-line looks a mess at the minute. I guess maybe throwing Chris Reed, into that group.
if Ryman was healthy, part of me thought, would you throw Ryman at left tackle, move Pryor to right guard? Pryor's got guard experience.
Yeah.
And, put Pinter in kind of that 6-man role, if you will. Where's Dennis Kelly at? Could he impact at all? We haven't really talked about him, but, not seeing Ryman today.
Is he on the IR?
No, he's on active? 53, and he's practicing. I don't even think he was on the injury report today.
He wasn't on it last week either.
Yeah. Certainly, the O-line had some losses, but I'd like to think you could overcome a loss of Mark Lewinsky, but clearly not.
Did you see the video Dan Orlovsky put out today?
I did not.
Check it out. It's on his Twitter. He does a film breakdown of it's like a minute 45, minute 47, I think.
Yeah.
Of the Colts game from Jacksonville.
Okay.
And I can't tell you.
Have a drink close by?
No, it's just one play.
Oh, okay.
He just explains what happens on the one specific play he was watching. But essentially, he was talking about the Jags overloaded one side of the ball, and what should have happened is Nelson, Kelly, Pinter, and Smith should have slid right, because I think there were 4 guys, or there was 3, one showing pressure. Was
that Josh Allen looping around?
Yes.
I do remember this.
Josh Allen looping around, Matt Pryor just absolutely whipping him, in my opinion. He just straight got right past him. Leave Jonathan Taylor as the back to block the safety, but instead Kelly goes left, and he and Nelson kind of double team a guy, and that left Pryor on an island 1-on-1. So that was just something that he put out today.
Yeah, you're obviously seeing some individual beats, but you're also seeing some stunts, just absolutely, mental breakdowns and stuff like that.
And another part of it was I think there was a stunt on the right side of the line, and Pinter and Smith didn't switch or pass off the guy that Pinter was blocking to Smith, and another guy came in through the inside who would have got to Matt Ryan if Josh Allen didn't beat.
You got to think Chris Jones is going to be opposite Danny Pinter every snap on Sunday, right?
Chris, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh boy, you better get some help that way. Who's calling me? Oh, he knows I'm recording the pod. Kay Ferguson, 2006 at Jaguars, 2011 at the Saints, 2017 home against the Jaguars, 2021 at Jaguars, and yesterday.
There's some ringing endorsements. Does he want me to rank these games?
I don't know. This is the one that he said.
Yeah, that is a. I guess ranking them from worst to. Part of me just hears those years and teams and thinks, let's just stab our eyes with pens and golf tees instead. I 2021 Jags, I think that's the worst. Sunday is probably right up there. 2011 Saints, God, wasn't that 62-0? I think on Monday Night Football.
No, that was 2017.
Well,
right?
They've had multiple Saints meltdowns on Monday Night Football. You're thinking of the Drew Brees perfect game, 29-30 or whatever it was. Yeah, they all
62-7. Yeah,
62-7. Yeah. God. You know how hard it is to score 62 points with how much the clock runs in the NFL. I thought this the other day. I saw one of Irsay's hat picks. I'm like, Irsay should do a hat pick for the fans of the Titans, Jags, and Texans, saying thank you for having such awful football. Here's a thank you. And because you guys cheer for such awful teams, that means my team will not be out of it for quite some time. I don't know. A little hat pick action there.
Yeah. Powers that be. You think Sean Payton can be lured in here? I heard a lot of buzz preseason about him wanting to make a return.
Yeah, I think Sean Payton will be a head coach in the NFL next season. Correct me if I'm wrong, Eddie. A team's got to trade for him?
Correct. He is under contract with the Saints through 2024. So, under my estimation or guesstimation here, I would assume that you would have to trade for his contract rights.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure what New Orleans would want.
Yeah, that obviously is not something you typically see. But yeah, I get every indication that Sean Payton wants to coach and wants to coach soon. So,
3 questions left. Arturo and AJ, this question comes from last week. With the misery of watching Notre Dame and the Colts play this weekend, I like how you threw in last week because Notre Dame picked up a win.
Yeah.
With watching the misery of those two teams this past weekend, it could be the emotions running high, but at this point, just draft a kicker and relieve me of the misery.
Again, it's not the craziest idea. Eddie, I was thinking back on some of picks in a range you would draft kickers. Like 5th round. And again, this year, Eric Johnson. Obviously, you've had good 5th round picks. Jordan Wilkins would be, I think, near the top of that list. Anthony Walker would definitely be at the top of the list. But again, you've also had, didn't you cut Sean Davis last year, the safety, pretty early? Reese Fountain never really developed.
Did Sean Davis even make it through training camp?
Yeah, I'm starting to think about it. I'm like, gosh, did he? I think he might have got cut at the final cut down, but he never even sniffed a roster spot. Marvell Tell is a guy that didn't really pan out. And sure, some of these 5th round picks had a moment or two, but I just sit here and think to myself, like, and I'm not sitting in here for 1 minute like you draft a kicker and you automatically cure it. Like, there's drafted kickers that don't work out, but if you can do that, like, oh my gosh, I mean, if you can find a quality kicker, a top 7 kicker in this league for the next decade, to me, hell yeah, that's worth a 5th round pick. And again, it might sound crazy for some people to hear that, but this league, way too much end of game situations not to have a quality kicker.
Joel, with a second question that made it on the pod. This is also with Craig. Do you think Reich, a.k.a. the Riverboat Gambler, goes too far sometimes? On Sunday, he called an awful wildcat at Houston's 3-yard line and came away with no points. Year after year seems to have the same result where we have close games in the end and wished we had the easy points. Should we just start taking the points when we can?
Yeah, and again, some of these questions came from week 1. Eddie, there's this balance. I like aggression. I think it's important to have. I think it's this balance where you play, and I know some people would strongly disagree with this, which is fine. There's a balance when you play, I think, some of these bad teams where those teams are looking for hope. They're looking for belief. They need you to help them find that. And in that Houston case, to me, I felt like the Colts moved the ball pretty well early in that game. I felt like the Colts were controlling field position and it just felt like they were the better team a little bit early on. And boom, as soon as that 4th down stopped, all of a sudden you ignited that stadium, which I don't know if that is even possible. I think that venue is a horrible atmosphere post J.J. Watt. But you just kind of gave them hope. So, I know I'm like, well, when you play bad teams, that means you don't get as aggressive. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on this. I just think to this question, there are also a lot of times where you do get 4th downs and you do stay aggressive, and we just don't acknowledge them.
Yeah,
we're just like, oh yeah, oh boy, got lucky there. We're not going to talk about that on Monday. Whereas you don't get them, like people want to critique it for like an hour.
Last question comes from Chris. Which is more concerning for you? The drops by the entire Colts team, wide receivers, tight ends, and including quarterback snaps, or the inconsistencies in the kicking game, including kickoff penalties?
Yeah, again, special teams penalties, that stuff unfortunately can happen. I mean, it's just unbelievable the speed that those plays are at. And those guys are just trying to keep their spot in the roster. I just think some of that happens. The drops, that's where it falls kind of in the inexcusable category. You are not talented enough at wide receiver and tight end to overcome that. The Colts are big believers. Like Ebron, I think, is a perfect example. They took a chance on Ebron because they felt like they could live with his drops and he would make enough plays. Desmond Patman and Alec Pierce and Doolin. I mean, they're not going to create enough big plays for you, in my opinion, to overcome that. I think we've seen that in the first couple weeks. So when you are a not talented pass catching group, the fundamentals have got to be there.
Quick stat I just found on Next Gen Stats.
Oh, you're in a rabbit hole.
I am 3rd in the NFL in yards or average separation in routes. Guess.
Who is 3rd?
Guess. He's a member of the Colts.
Doolin?
No.
Granson.
Yep.
Yeah. He's had a couple of, I think, schemed up very nicely. crossers and things like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I would say he's an outlier in that group based off what we've seen out of them so far. All right, Eddie, it's been a long podcast. I need a prediction from you for Sunday. 6.5-point underdog, the Colts.
What's the total?
I'm going to guess 50.
Let me pull it up. I like to keep my predictions around
in
that.
line with Vegas.
Yeah.
You want me to go first?
Go
Look
for
at
it.
that, 50.5. I was close. Really close.
Yeah.
Chiefs 31, Colts 20. I think there is...
Whoa.
31-23. I think you have half the blueprint against the Kansas City team and half of it being Taylor. Mm-hmm. But can the four-man rush get home? Can it get home? This morning as I was walking Max, I was looking up Mahomes' numbers.
He's walking already? Dang. He's got incredible athleticism there.
I was going to say, man, he'd be running some routes for the Colts, honestly, if that was the case. I looked up Mahomes' numbers against Gus Bradley.
6-1, right?
6-1. I think average points, not a huge number. I think it's like 26, 27, 15 TDs, 2 picks. You think back to that 2019 meeting when you beat them. No Tyreek Hill in that game. Should mention that. No Shaquille Leonard in that game as well. What you did is Kamoko Terry literally hit him and hurt Mahomes early in the game, and he was hobbled. And that sent a message. It obviously injured him, which was huge. And that was a big factor. You ran the ball 45 times in that game. You had the ball for more than 15 minutes. All the recipes. At one point, you had a 14-play, 35-yard drive, which I thought only Navy did.
Yeah.
It's incredible controlling the ball. Vinatieri made a bunch of short field goals, and you won that game. I just think Kansas City, with a 10-day break, sitting there and watching what Buffalo did on Monday night, I think Kansas City's going to have a psyche of, not only are we playing in a great division and need to win to maintain that, remember, Eddie, it's just one bye in the playoffs. That number 1 seed means even more. And Buffalo, they don't look like a team that's letting up anytime soon. So I just think you'll have a Kansas City team that will be pretty locked in off the 10-day break. So I will go with Chiefs 31, Colts 23.
Andy Reid is 4-1 after a Thursday night game.
Interesting.
13-1 after buys.
Well, none of that sounds good for the Colts.
The lone loss, the Redskins, 2012.
Boom.
But here is my prediction.
Yeah.
I'm going to go Chiefs 27-20. It's a late drive from Patrick Mahomes that'll win it.
Ooh, boy. So you think tie game? Late.
I do.
Interesting.
I look at the way that LA played them, and LA, they had their chances to win that game. They dominated the clock, time of possession, kept Mahomes off the field. Colts can certainly do that. Hopefully Pittman is healthy, because I think that changes everything. But I do like the 27-20.
All right, let's come back on Monday. We'll do a recap pod, and then Wednesday again. It'll be Tennessee next week, another home game for the Colts. Anything else, Eddie?
No, can't think of anything.
He's Eddie Garrison. I'm Kevin Bowen. Thanks for listening to Kevin's Corner. We will talk to you on Monday.